Let's transition. Let's go to a matchup that's going to be played at SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles Sunday afternoon. It's the 6-2 Detroit Lions traveling to LA to take on the 4-4 LA Chargers. The Detroit Lions are favored by 3 points. It's a 4:05 p.m. Eastern Standard Time kickoff. The over-under for this matchup is 48.5 points. So, when I look at this matchup between the Lions and the Chargers, let's start off with the Detroit Lions. Obviously, the Detroit Lions are 6-2 right now. They are the number one team in the NFC North. They are led by Jared Goff. And so far this year, Jared Goff, 12 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 2,174 passing yards. He's completing 68% of his passes. Jared Goff is playing really, really good football. And when I think about Jared Goff, no, Jared Goff is not an elite quarterback. Jared Goff is not as good as a Justin Herbert is. He's not as good as a Josh Allen is. He's not as good as a Jalen Hurts is, or Joe Burrow, a Lamar Jackson, or a Patrick Mahomes, or even a Trevor Lawrence for that matter. But Jared Goff is a good quarterback in the NFL. And he's a veteran. He plays well in games that are big. You know, he plays well. Again, he's not the kind of quarterback that's going to win you a Super Bowl. But I feel like in a game like this, going up against L.A. Chargers football team, that's an average football team, these are the type of games a quarterback like Jared Goff can win you. He really, really can. And so I feel like he's been a stabilizer in that Detroit Lions organization. And the Lions have done a tremendous job the way they have built their football team. They really, really have. And I feel like when you want to be a true contender in the NFL, you have to have the quarterback right, you have to have the head coach right, and you have to also have the right general manager as well. And I feel like the Detroit Lions have hit on all three of those. They really, really have. And you look at the 49ers' recent draft picks. They recently drafted Jahmyr Gibbs. They still got as well Sam Laporta, who they drafted as well. They got Jameson Williams, Aiden Hutchinson. They've done a tremendous job in their recent draft picks. And that's how you build a great football team. That's how you put together a great football team. So shout out to Detroit Lions general manager Brad Holmes, because he's the one who went and traded for Jared Goff. Remember, they had Matthew Stafford in Detroit. They moved off of Matthew Stafford, brought in Jared Goff, and Jared Goff is not as good as Matthew Stafford was, but that's a nice replacement for someone and for your football team to still be competent. If you lose Matthew Stafford and you bring in Jared Goff, that's a nice replacement. That's not a significant drop-off. Like, and I had to change my whole perspective, because I used to feel like Matthew Stafford was leaps and bounds better than Jared Goff. And the way Jared Goff has played in these last 2 years, it's much closer than I used to really think. It really is. And so that was a nice replacement by the Lions, bringing in Jared Goff to replace Matthew Stafford. And obviously, at head coach, you got Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell, since he's been the head coach of the Detroit Lions, he is 23-30-1. So he's won 44% of his games. So I like the way he has coached this Detroit Lions football team. I'm sorry, that 23-30-1 record is his overall record. Since he's been the head coach of the Detroit Lions, he's 18-23-1. So that's his record so far since he's been the head coach of the Detroit Lions, 18-23-1. But I like their head coach, quarterback, and general manager. And you look at their football team, at running back, you got David Montgomery, who's going to return back to the field this week. You got Jahmyr Gibbs. Remember, Jahmyr Gibbs had a great performance in their Monday night win against the Las Vegas Raiders a few weeks ago. Jahmyr Gibbs, 26 carries, 152 rushing yards, average 5.8 yards per carry. 1 touchdown. And I like that dynamic with Gibbs and Montgomery in the backfield. So now that you have Montgomery healthy, that 1-2 punch at running back is going to be dynamic for the Lions. Gibbs and Montgomery in the backfield is going to be dynamic for sure. And I like their offensive line. I seriously feel like the Detroit Lions have a top 5 offensive line in the NFL. You got Frank Ragnow up front. You got Jonah Jackson. Okay, you got Taylor Decker as well. You got Penei Sewell, who they drafted a few years ago. He's a nice right tackle in the NFL. So I like this Lions offensive line. They want to play smash mouth, physical football. They really, really do. And their numbers back it up statistically. Statistically, the Detroit Lions average 131 rushing yards per game. That's ranked 6th in the NFL. And as an offense, they average 403 total yards per game. That's ranked 2nd in the NFL. So I really, really like the way this Lions team is built. I really, really do. Now, on the flip side, for the L.A. Chargers, you got Justin Herbert as their quarterback. And so far this year, Justin Herbert, 13 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 2,026 passing yards. He's completing 67% of his passes. I feel like Justin Herbert is a good quarterback. He has the potential to be great, but he's good. And I say it all the time. Other elite quarterbacks have the luxury of having quality head coaches. Joe Burrow has Zach Taylor. Now, Zach Taylor's not elite, but he's a quality NFL head coach. Patrick Mahomes has Andy Reid. Trevor Lawrence has Doug Peterson. Jalen Hurts has Nick Sirianni. Justin Herbert has Brandon Staley. Brandon Staley is a bad NFL head coach. I don't understand how the hell he still has a job. I really don't. I don't understand how he still has a job. But I hear all the time about how, the Chargers have elite personnel. Keenan Allen is a nice number 1 receiver, but on their team, after Keenan Allen, you got Quentin Johnston, okay? You got Palmer as well at receiver. You got Gerald Everett at tight end. But I never looked at this. I feel like 2 years ago, the Chargers, you could have said they had elite personnel offensively. But you can't say that anymore. Mike Williams is out for the year with the ACL injury. You still got Austin Eckler in the backfield, but he's not as motivated like he once was because the Chargers haven't paid him the money he feels he deserves. So I don't really feel like Justin Herbert is working with much. I really, really don't. I like Keenan Allen, and Joshua Palmer was nice. He's on IR at the moment. I just brought him up, but he's on IR. He's injured. So what is he really working with offensively? And defensively, we know how bad the L.A. Chargers have been. Now, some people were trying to say, the Chargers are this great defensive team now because they were great against the woeful New York Jets last week. They were great against the Jets. Last week against the Jets, 0 touchdowns allowed, 8 sacks, 71 total tackles, 7 passes defended, 3 fumble recoveries. They held the Jets to go 3 of 17 on 3rd down, but that was against Zach Wilson. And that Jets offense is awful because they have Zach Wilson. So I don't think the Chargers are this elite defense that people are trying to make them out to be based on that performance against the Jets. So far this year, the defense for the Chargers, they give up 403 total yards per game. That's ranked 31st in the NFL. They give up 286 passing yards per game. That's ranked dead last in the NFL. And teams score 22 points per game against that Chargers defense. That's ranked 21st in the NFL. They're more closer to being a bottom half football team when it comes to defense than being in the upper echelon. That was people are getting confused and thinking that they're this elite defense because they went up against the Jets. No, they're not an elite defensive unit. And so I think in this matchup, the Detroit Lions are the better football team. They are the more physical football team. And so I expect the Detroit Lions to beat the L.A. Chargers in L.A. I think the Chargers are still an average football team. I think the Detroit Lions are a good football team. And I think they're gonna handle business this year. Real quick, the Chargers wins this year. They beat the Raiders in week 4. They beat the Vikings in week 3. They beat the Jets and they beat the Bears. So their wins are not quality wins. Chargers have not had any quality wins. Vikings, Raiders, Bears, Jets. No, I'm not buying into the Chargers quite yet. So I'm going to roll with the Detroit Lions to beat the L.A Chargers in Los Angeles Sunday afternoon. I'll go Lions 27, Chargers 20.